Good afternoon, everybody. I have quite a few slides and I'm going to be moving through them very quickly. So I did put the slide deck in the chat. Plus Susan will be making it available to you later if you want to come back and look at some of the notes on the slides that we're not really touching on in this workshop. But I am Terri Novacek, and we are here to talk about how do we find sanity in supporting self-determined learning. And self-determined learning is when the child or the learner is determining the learning, what they want to learn, how they want to learn, and all of that. And so oftentimes, especially with our younger children, we find ourselves saying, oh no, that couldn't happen. My child is not capable of that. I haven't, they haven't been told everything. And so we're going to bust up some of those myths in the next 20 minutes. And I really, and part of the reason why I said I'd be going through these slides so quickly is I really want to have time at the end for you guys to be able to share and compare your own experiences. So just some foundational things to think about, just to get the mind in the right place, is that learning is not the priority. And I know that sounds really weird coming from an educator, but if you could shift the mind towards it being about the learner versus the learning, whether, because it's very common, right? We say, oh, this is the curriculum, these are the standards, and those are all outside things. But we really need to start with who's the learner and how was the learner feeling, because there is that hierarchy of needs. And if we're not feeling in a safe place and we don't have all of our basic needs met that go outside of learning, like simple things like, do we have rest, and are we feeling safe? Have we been fed appropriately? So starting with the learner and where they are and what are their talents and what pace fits them the best, and are they at peace with themselves? How are they feeling about themselves? How do they feel about their relationship and other people? And then how do they feel about learning? Do they come from a place of, learning is fun, I am capable, and I enjoy learning? Then you move into the plan, taking all of that information about the learner to develop the plan. And I'm always saying authentic learning requires a student plan, not a lesson plan. Again, teachers, come from a mindset of a lesson plan. But in our schools, we come from a place of a student plan. What is the student's learning plan? And so that's where you move things from, how you're feeling to how are we going to make this work? Where do we want to go and how do we want to get there? Plans are different for everybody. Just because you're a fourth grader and there are such a thing as fourth grade standards, that doesn't mean that that's where everybody is and what every fourth grader is and where every fourth grader should be working on. And going back to that old Stephen Covey saying about beginning with the end in mind, we are a positive discipline organization, and you may have seen some of our parenting workshops offered by Lois Ingber or Lori Swim from Dimensions. There's an activity that's done where you think about your child, your future child, your adult child, and what you want for them. And if you have not done one of those workshops, we are having a podcast come out in the next week, and that activity will be part of that. So I encourage you to listen. So now you've got the plan, but a big part of the plan is the personal learning network. And you'll see this graphic here, which is hard to read, sorry, but this is more about like materials, but it's also about human resources. Like where can you go? We're not back in those days where all the learning comes from the teacher. It's all over the place. So who is the student going to use for their personal learning network? And it could be anything from a neighbor to some podcasts to Uncle George Aunt Millie, like there's a big community or ecosystem of learning, and the educational facilitator is just one of those folks. And I put some statistics here, which seems out of place for the personal learning network, but this is why I put them here. Because a lot of times when we think of our learning network and the resources, we think of, okay, what are we going to read? What am I going to listen to? What am I going to look at? And really keep in mind that when you are only reading information or only listening to information or watching information, you have less than 50% chance that you will retain that information. Where you see the best success is when you are seeing it and hearing it. That's about 50% retention. Actually having a discussion around it is 70%. Having the experience, engaging in it is 80%. And then teaching something to others is 95%. And those are really good stats to keep in mind when you're trying to figure out who's going to be the learning network for the learner. The idea of a growth mindset has been around long enough now that it's pretty much a common term. It's not just, you know, an educator's term, but the idea of the fixed mindset is that person, you know, that feels like, well, we're born with our smarts. We're only as smart as we can get. And the growth mindset is one that can take that attitude of, well, I just don't know that yet. And if I work harder at it, I can get better at it. And the language is really key here. And it's also the idea that the mentor's mindset is just as important. If you're an adult working with a child and you're thinking to yourself, this child's never going to be able to learn this, they pick up on that. And if the child is feeling like, I'm never going to learn this, you know, they're automatically feeling that sense of defeat. Why even try? But if they can take an attitude of, how can I learn this? What can I change? How can I approach this differently? It changes everything. Some of you may be familiar with the work behind love languages. And I am bringing love languages into this because one of them is acts of service. And I recognize in my years as being a parent, both my kids are adults now, I am one that my love language to the people around me is acts of service. And it sounds great, but then I realized later, an act of service can sometimes not be a gift. If I'm feeling like, let me do this for you, that's my way of showing you how much I appreciate you, you do that too much for your kids and you're not doing them any favors. So while you think, you know, let me get you dressed and let me do these things for you that you're able to do for yourself, that you're showing them your love, and we come from a place of love, right? But really, we need to be thinking of serving them, those acts of service, as giving them the gift of independence. And as our friend, Dr. William Stixrud often says, he's the author of the book, The Self-Directed Child, never do for children that which they can do for themselves. And another thing that I did learn to say to my teenage children, because I didn't learn this early enough, but it still works even with the teenagers, is again going back to language. I love you so much, I'm not going to do this for you. And of course, you guys can just all see the eye roll right now that you're going to get from your adolescent or your teen, right? But the message to them is, I believe in you. I know you can do this. And it's just an incredible feeling, you know, at first, depending on how much we've been doing for our kids that they can do for themselves, it will take longer. But when they do start doing things for themselves, even preparing their own food, determining their own lessons. They get hooked. It's a really great feeling. We're naturally drawn to growing. That's just how humans are wired, and we like growing, and we like feeling competent, and we like contributing. So as a strategy, what I would suggest is first just to start with yourself, right? Everything begins with us. And identify your own core values. And you can have different values for different things. Maybe there's the core values for you as your family. Maybe there's the core values just for you as an individual. But what are priorities for you? And I put an example of some that are at the top of my list when I was homeschooling my own kids. Just based on all the research that I knew how important play was at all ages, how important rest is, how important nutrition is, and growth as well as contribution. And so whenever I engaged with my kids around their learning plan and around our daily schedule, these were the things that stayed at the forefront. So next, you lay out a typical week of tasks, and then pull out those tasks and start tying them to those core values. Are you engaging in a lot of tasks that don't connect or align with your core values? And take the time to reflect on that. Does the core value need to, is that really not a core value for you? Or is it just a core value that you're not giving enough attention to? Identify needs versus wants and adjust the list as you feel necessary. And I'm not saying wants are bad and that you have to get rid of the wants, but it's very important that you recognize them as wants and why you want them. And then determine what can be delegated, done differently, or postponed. So as you are trying to get yourself in this place to work with your family, to empower your own kids, go through this reflection, begin with yourself, get good at this, because next you're going to ask your kids to do the same thing, to ask them what's important to them. How do they spend their time? Does how they spend their time align with the things that are important to them? What is the difference between a want and a need? And why are needs needs? And then what are other ways that they might be able to accomplish what they need to accomplish if they're finding that there's something they don't like doing or it's taking too much time? And then now it's time for action. Once you've done all that reflection, you should have enough of an outline now. And first, I would say declare. You're coming up with your own declaration of independence. So as a family, agree on the behaviors, the practices, and the consequences. What do you all agree on as a family as far as your expectations and keeping peace in the home and everybody's responsibility? And then declutter. When you're preparing the environment for your kids, so for them to engage in their own learning and drive their own learning, get rid of all the clutter. Just put the tools out there that they need for what they're going to do. And then design space for each of those needs. Design an area, designate an area for the quiet work, for the collaborative work, for access to digital support. And then determine why you're learning, how you're going to do it, and what you're going to do to determine when the learning has been finished. And then document it. The family schedule on a whiteboard still today remains to be, even in this digital age, something that really works well for families, whether it's in a hallway or the kitchen fridge or whatever. But what is the daily schedule? What is everybody doing? It's a great way to communicate, and it's a great way to have that accountability. And I would say, going back to the idea of what's essential, have everybody in the family, what is the one thing that they will do that day that is essential? Now, we all know we're going to do other things, right? We're still going to make sure that everybody's fed and clean and healthy and they do this, that, and the other. But what's the one thing that each person in the family wants to accomplish in that day so that when they lay down to rest that night, they feel like they've accomplished, like they've contributed, or like they've grown in some way? And that was really quick. So now you know why I gave you the slide deck, because I ran through it all real quick. But we have 5 minutes, and I just wanted to give people a chance to maybe share some personal experiences. If you have a question about a specific thing in your family, or if you'd like to share anything that's worked with your family. Or an educational facilitator that's seen great things work for other families. Trish Rupel, I'm going to put you on the spot because you are the queen of this. Are you there?
I am, and I have a blender going on right now, so that's why I was holding off. But thank you, Terry, first of all. This is, especially like the beginning where you said, don't do what your child can do for themselves. And I think that is, I reflect back when I think, even with working with students, you know, just kind of being quiet and allowing them to respond, because sometimes if they're slow to respond, you know they can do it, and you know they have something to contribute. So I see that working, telling myself to be quiet basically and counting to 10 to allow either students to respond or my own children in the home when you know that they have something to say or they want to share, especially my son. Those of you, I don't know if this is to boys, but boys I have found in my home could take a while to respond. So I really think it's that allowing them the opportunity to respond, to do it themselves without jumping in. So thank you for sharing that today and making me reflect on that.
You know, I think the key is, I say this all the time, but you know, the role of the teacher is not to have all the right answers, but to ask the right questions. And I feel that way about the workplace. I feel like that in parenting. And again, you know, it depends on where your child is developed mentally, but when they're asking for an answer, think of a question that you can throw back at them to help them come to the answer on their own and give them that practice of critical thinking. And again, you know, you want to do baby steps, but it could begin with something as simple as what's everybody's you know, circadian rhythm, like your morning schedule. Who likes to get up early? Who doesn't? If you have young children that get up early, they're still able, and this goes back to the agreements, they're still able to get themselves something healthy to eat. And as a family, when you come together in your family meeting and you're working together to say, how can we do this? And if any of you were just in Alexis's workshop, it does not all fall on the parent. So Lois, did you want to pipe in?
Sorry, I just wanted to notice that there was a question from Malia in the chat. I don't know if you saw it, if you have a moment just to respond, Terry, about her child who has ASD and supporting them in their learning as an independent learner. Okay, so that's one of those questions that the answer is, it depends. I'm not sure where your child is on the spectrum,
I can tell you that we have worked with nonverbal students that have been able to slowly take on different roles, or a bigger role, I should say, in their learning. So I'd have to know a little bit more about that. And if you, I'm going to put my phone number in the chat. If you want to talk, call me, Malia. I would be happy to just get a little bit more information so I can answer it better. Hi, Veronica. Thank you very much for sharing that. Yeah, your kids will surprise you at just how capable they are. So I do want to be mindful of the time, and it is 2:05, so we'll be going back to that first link for the raffle. If anybody wants to give me a call, send me an email with a specific question, I am happy to chat with you. Thank you.